Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin Powers. I'm also the co-festival director and program director for Something Wicked Film Festival and Events. And welcome to our podcast. Now, we have a very special podcast today because not only am I doing a film with one of my favorite co-hosts slash guest panelists or guest hosts, but we're also doing a film that's very near and dear to his heart and one that just seems to rip my heart out every time I watch it. So I want to thank my special guest, Thomas Tinnerello, for joining us today. Thank you for Thomas for coming out.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm gonna let you tell everyone what film we are talking about today and why we are talking about this film today.
Oh dear. Well, first of all, I don't want to be disingenuous. It's not exactly near and dear to my heart, although now that I've seen it, I'll never forget it. That's for sure. As I don't think anybody who sees this film will ever forget it. Um, but I want to say that I wanted to draw everyone's attention and do a whole show on this film, 2000 Maniacs, because this is a show that is about cult horror and classic horror. And I feel like it behooves us to talk about one of two people when you say anything classic or cult. The one guy, hopefully we'll get to eventually, is hold on, can you hear that guy in the background?
No.
Okay, good. I heard a ghost. No. So the one guy is Roger Corman, and the other guy is the guy we're going to talk about, is Herschel Gordon Lewis. Lucio Fulci has been called the Godfather of gore, and I think he deserves that title. But Herschel Gordon Lewis definitely deserves the title of the pioneer of gore.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
Because he did it first. And whether you do it first and do it best, and we could talk about that, whether or not when you do something first, does that mean you did it best? Most often it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that when you do something first, especially something that's become as ubiquitous as the element of graphic violence and gore and guts, and something that has come to be so synonymous with this genre, you deserve to be remembered. You deserve to be talked about. No matter how really good, no matter how particularly good you were at your craft. And, some people revile Herschel for his perceived badness at his craft, although I would argue that this is his best film. I haven't seen all of his movies, but even Herschel Gordon Lewis himself said this is his favorite of his movies.
Well, we'll say that he is called the Godfather of Gore by Frank Henenlotter, who actually did a documentary on him called The Godfather of Gore.
Oh yeah, Henenlotter, of course, is the guy who made Basket Case.
Oh yeah, one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and also just so happens that as we're recording this past Wednesday, March 20th, is the 60th anniversary of the release of this movie in my home state of Florida, which then after that release, it spread to all over the Southeast. and contrary to popular belief, this movie made lots of money at the drive-ins. And so it was very successful. So I guess we should start under what exactly is this movie?
I think we do need to do that with this movie because there's probably a lot more people out there who have not seen this film than have seen this film.
Right. And also, and for those of you who haven't seen it, spoilers coming your way because there are some big twists in this movie. And but I will say that this movie is kind of like a song in that you can know all the lyrics and it doesn't spoil your enjoyment of it. Because you still have not experienced the song. And so it's the same thing with 2000 Maniacs. So 2000 Maniacs is basically the story of these 6 individuals who are driving along a highway and in the deep south. We're not sure exactly where. All we know is that they're heading in the direction of Augusta, Georgia, which is about 160 miles away. We know this because there is a painted sign in the road that says exactly that when the movie starts. So I did some triangulation, and judging from the fact that by the end of the movie, they're going through the border and they're going south towards Atlanta, I guess they're in South Carolina when all these horrors take place.
Hmm.
That's my guess. That's my guess. But they did not shoot it in South Carolina. This is a Florida film. They shot it in St. Cloud, Florida, in locations which by now have been destroyed, gutted, and replaced by something Disney. So Disney has built their shrines to Mickey Mouse on sites where people were slaughtered, at least fake slaughter. Thank God. Uh, so anyway, they're traveling down this lonesome country road, and this redneck guy in blue overalls is in a tree watching cars go by, and he's looking at their license plates to see what state they're from. And depending on the state, they will put up a fake detour sign painted in very bloodish looking red colors. And the detour would take them to their town, the town of Pleasant Valley, population 2,000. And and in Pleasant Valley, they are celebrating their 100th anniversary, their centennial, and that's a big celebration that basically is a front for them to get revenge on something that happened in their town 100 years ago, because they are going to ritually and celebrationally, that's a word. If that's a word, I'm going to invent that word right now. Celebrationally, kill all of these people but in ways that are like, with the exception of one murder, with the exception of one, they're like gamifying, like they're like making redneck games basically out of their deaths.
Which is very odd for even a film of this time period.
Yes, because remember, people, like I said, this is 60th anniversary. This movie was released in 1964.
Uh-huh.
Not 74, 64. Which, to put it in context of the time period this movie came out in, this movie came out, like I said, May 20th, 1964. The year before that, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. The year after that, America entered the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
Which I didn't know until recently, that Vietnam had actually been going on since 1955. We just didn't enter the war until 65. It's funny. So this movie came out at a very volatile time period. And while it's not technically the first to have graphic bloody gore in it, because you see arms roll, heads roll, thumbs roll, people get crushed by rocks, people get barbecued, people get and you see all of it. And for that time, I mean, I'm surprised this movie wasn't banned, but I think some of that may have had to do with the fact that people were expecting weird stuff at your local drive-ins. Yep. And also, Ursula Gordon Lewis had done something akin to this before with Blood Feast. So Blood Feast is really was the story of a guy who was collecting body parts from beautiful women to sacrifice to an Egyptian mummy queen goddess thing. So that was basically, I guess, Herschel Gordon Lewis's version of The Mummy. And that movie is credited as being the first gore film. This one is probably the one he did right after that. And it's probably his best movie.
It's more effective in the gore than Blood Feast was, in my opinion.
Yeah, I haven't seen Blood Feast yet, but that's what a lot of people say.
Okay. Yeah. I happen to have seen a lot. Now I'm gonna preface this really easily. I had no interest in seeing any of Lewis's films until probably 3 years ago, when I started going through all of his movies, simply because I'm a huge fan of Frank Henenlotter. I saw his documentary and said, I watch some of these films because I had never seen them. I'd seen the reboot, the 2001 Maniacs.
Oh, with Robert Englund.
And I've seen the Wizard of Gore remake, but I had never seen the original of either one of those. And so then I started to go back and watch all of his films. Now, I haven't seen them all either. I've seen a lot of them, but he did a lot of movies.
Yes, he did.
But, the only ones that are really fondly remembered are these movies. His nudie cutie type of movies, overly sexual ones. No one remembers those, but these ones
Yeah,
are the ones that are fondly remembered because he was the godfather of gore.
yeah, and it's funny because like you mentioned those the nudie movies. Like I, we need to remember, Kevin, that our audience is probably super young and doesn't know what the heck we're talking about when we say that. So allow me to explain.
Okay.
So y'all, back in the days before they had porn, and back in the days before they had the internets, back in the days before they even had television, there was there, if you wanted to make a name for yourself in the low budget exploitation circuit, you had to do something that nobody else was doing. And Herschel Gordon Lewis was one of the guys who said, I'm going to do something nobody else is doing. I'm going to make movies with full frontal nudity in them, but I'm going to make it like in a nudist colony. That was his big thing. Is like he would go to nudist colonies, film nudists, and do these stories, often cut together with some kind of like teen drama or something like that, which is what he was doing like the year before that. But after a while, those movies started to, with the rise of Playboy and those magazines such as that, it started to come in, and also people were discovering the French art house
Mm-hmm.
cinema, which of course had tons of nudity in them, and Swedish films, of course. So Herschel he wasn't making as much money with the nudity films, so he decided, well, what's something nobody is doing? I'm going to go the opposite direction. And I'm going to, instead of nudity, I'm just going to do blood and gore. And I'm just going to not shy away. I'm going to just put it right there as best as I can and get, whoever I can to do it. That is what he did. And he rightly thought that would all be all he needed to sell the movie. And in 1963 through 69, even up to 1970, he was going hard into this. And he was right, because he made lots of money with it.
Like that for the rest of his career, I believe. I don't think he
Yeah.
went back to anything else. I think he just did the horror and gore films.
Well, if I'm looking over his IMDb, he did try to do some more conventional exploitation films after that. But yeah, after Wizard of Gore, he kind of fell off the radar for 20 years, almost 30 years, until he came back in 2009 with the Uh-Oh Show, which is, we'll get to in our second half of our show, starred cult icon Joel Wynkoop, who I interviewed for this show. And the Uh-Oh Show actually ended up being his last full finished feature film, because he did segments for an anthology movie after that, the year after that, and then sadly Herschel Gordon Lewis died of cancer after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah, Blood Feast was the first, and like I said, I was very surprised that this movie or Blood Feast, neither of them were banned. But apparently, I looked it up, and there was an injunction placed against this movie in Sarasota, Florida. But that didn't actually hurt its bottom line at all. In fact, if anything, it actually drove people towards the movie more.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Somebody once said, I don't know who it was, but somebody said, Blood Feast is like a Walt Whitman poem. It's not good, but it is the first of its kind. So,
Okay.
sorry if you're a Walt Whitman fan. But anyway, so yeah, but for 2000 Maniacs, he decided to kind of put more of a story into it. And what this movie really is, though, is it is a parody of a big Hollywood musical called Brigadoon.
Mm.
And the story of Brigadoon was a story that starred Gene Kelly, who was the amazing guy behind Singing in the Rain, which is probably my favorite musical of all time. So Gene Kelly plays this American guy, and I think his girlfriend, and they go to Scotland, and they end up in this Scottish town in the Highlands that is actually, and again, spoilers, folks, spoilers, because if you know Brigadoon, you kind of know the plot of this movie, because they go to this town, and this town is like stuck in the Middle Ages, and it's not just they're being quaint, is that they are literally a town full of Middle Ages ghosts from Scotland. And they reappear in Scotland every 100 years. And I think one of the girls, the outsiders, falls in love with, it's Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly falls in love with one of the Scottish girls, and he has to decide whether or not he's going to stay with them or if he's gonna, leave and go back to civilization. In a weird way, Brigadoon kind of sets the tone for what will become kind of the Hallmark movie, the Hallmark template. The big city girl or big city guy comes to a small town, gets won over by their values, and then has to decide whether or not they stay with them or not. But at the end of Brigadoon, they leave the town vanishes, and they try and get somebody to come back to the town, and oops, the town is gone. So that's where all the supernatural stuff in this movie comes from. It comes from the fact that they're basically making a parody of Brigadoon. But
Wow.
yeah, so part of the reason, another reason that this movie is so important is that not only was it the second, at least, part of the early gore movies, but it really kind of gives us the template for a lot of things we've seen later. This is somebody said very, very, very astutely that this movie invents the subgenre of hicksploitation.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think it invents what somebody else called the murder catalog movie, which is to say anything like The Abominable Dr. Fives or the Saw movies or Hostel, where the whole point of seeing the movie is seeing people get murdered in very creative, interesting ways throughout the movie, and that's it. That is the only reason you see it. You're not even necessarily there to be scared. You're just there to see what kind of disgusting thing is going to happen next.
Yeah.
If you want to know where that starts, it starts here. And also, I think you can plainly see, because it's exploitation, there's certain performances in here that make me think, oh, clearly our guy Rob Zombie was influenced by this movie. Clearly. Like the mayor in this town gives off massive Sid Haig vibes.
You're absolutely right. I did not think about that till now.
That's what they should have had in the remake, not Michael, not Robert Englund. It should have been Sid Haig being the mayor of this town.
You know what? If the remake had been made now, I guarantee you it probably would have been Sid Haig. But back then, when 2001 Maniacs came out, Sid Haig hadn't been resurrected. So
That's true. You're right, because Rob Zombie's have those corpses. Corpses came out the next year. That's right.
Yeah, I guarantee you that. Yeah, they had waited. I bet you Sid Haig. Yeah,
if they just waited one more year.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is a movie that Rob Zombie would love to get his hands on too, because it seems to be one that would be right up his alley and one that he would probably excel at doing a remake for.
I wish they'd offered him this instead of Halloween.
Oh my God! I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who will disagree with you on that one, but yeah.
So Kevin, I want to ask you something, because when we get into this, if people who are listening to this haven't yet figured this out, this movie was probably released, and from my conversation with Joel Weinkoop, and the impression that I get of Herschel Gordon Lewis from talking to him, I get the impression that he wasn't trying to spark controversy with this movie, although he was definitely trying to shock people.
Yeah.
No question about that. But I don't think he was trying to spark a riot or a race war or drive some kind of conversation about the troublesome past of America, of the Confederacy, American slavery, and lynching. But I feel like there's no way you can watch this movie now and not be struck in the face with that. Like, I'm looking at this, and to me, like, the most amazing and disturbing and just impactful minutes of this movie are the first 4 minutes. This movie has one of the most enthralling and disturbing title sequences I've ever seen.
Well, there you're doing the musical song, and of course you're seeing all the Confederate flags literally everywhere.
Oh yes, like you can't. You're talking about remaking this. You couldn't remake this movie today. Not like this, because like,
Good.
Dude. Oh, the song you mentioned. The song. This song is so jumpy It's so happy. It's so folky. It's stuck in my head for days.
Oh, Jesus.
It is a catchy tune. The South will rise again. And incidentally, sung by Herschel Gordon Lewis himself because he didn't want to pay anybody.
Oh, really? I did not know that. Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
Oh, yeah. He sang the song himself, and the people who are going, yeehaw, is the cast. Like, you just got the whole cast together and had them sing yeehaw into a can, and that's it. That is the song. And it's got lyrics like, Robert E. Lee bent his musket on his knee and let out a terrible sound. Yeehaw, the South's gonna rise again. And oh my gosh, seeing that juxtaposed with knowing that these two rednecks are basically leading these people to their dooms, with such a gleeful happiness, and also that every single human being, man, woman, and child, is in on it. And that's why it's called 2000 Maniacs. And this is kind of a thing that isn't done very often, because most of the time in a horror movie, there's just one guy or one monster in this quaint little southern town or this quaint little Midwestern town. Occasionally you'll get a town that's been overrun by, killer children, like Children of the Corn, where you have a mass of people who are evil kids. Okay, you might get that sometimes. But this is like the first movie that I remember seeing where it's an entire town of maniacs, an entire town of killers, an entire town of ritualized monsters, and down to like the kid. In fact, I will say the scariest person in the entire town, the scariest monster, is that first little friggin' kid we see, Billy, that satanic Dennis the Menace motherfricker who kills a cat with a noose.
Yeah, and then comes back at the end.
Oh, he's not just in the end. He's throughout the whole movie. If you look, he's there. So what they do is they bring these people, these Yankees, into the main square of the town in their convertibles with the convertibles down, which I realized as I was watching this, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a little John F. Kennedy imagery going on here. I didn't even think about that.
I didn't think about it until you just mentioned where in history this film lies, and I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah. So, like, graphic, disturbing violence was entering the minds of Americans very quickly over that 3-year period, because as soon as Vietnam started, the average American home would have been inundated with constant news coverage of blood and guts and dead soldiers from Vietnam. So, but like they're coming down the main square of this show, and like you see little Billy there waving his noose, dangle it in front of as a child-sized noose that he uses to hang a cat. Which I rewatched that first 4 minutes, and I had the same reaction when he kills the black cat. And I do think it's funny that it's a black cat that he kills. But although I should probably preface this, you don't see him murder the cat. You just see him hold the cat, take it off frame, put the noose around the cat's neck, make a movement, and you hear the noise. And the noise actually takes over the song. It overrides the song for a little bit. And it's just like, it jabs my brain in a way that was like, oh, especially because, as I said in a previous episode, I love cats. I'm a cat lover.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how much that disturbed me.
When I first saw this, and like I said, it's only been within the first 3 years ago. I think it's the first time I saw it. I guess this was around the same time that all the things about the Confederate statues were being torn down or removed.
Oh wow!
So when I watched the movie, I was like, I had a different mindset than I do now. The reason why I was watching this is because I just seen the documentary and I wanted to catch up because I'd never seen any of Lewis's actual films. So when I saw this, I was put back completely by the fact that I thought when I watched it, because I was in a different mindset, that this was like almost glorifying the whole Confederacy and all that type of stuff. So I never watched it again until I rewatched it now. But when I rewatched it, it almost comes off as a satire on the whole thing, because I finally realized that they know they lost the war. They know they're all dead. They want revenge, yet they still can't kill the 6 people that it takes for them to kill. And so yet again, they fail at their little war again and have to wait another 100 years, despite the fact they have a catchy song and several song numbers throughout the whole film that makes it all seem peppy, as though being a racist and having a noose wasn't a big deal. So, and yet they're still just ghosts, and that's all they ever really were. When I started thinking about the film like that, I started to think of how clever Herschel Gordon Lewis actually was, even in the 60s, when this became a big racial divide because of the Vietnam War and, of course, the JFK assassination and stuff like that. I saw that Lewis was being much more clever with the fact that with his film, despite the fact that it's masked as a gore film with musicals and stuff. If I had never seen that Godfather gore movie, I would have never given this damn movie a second thought. I would have thought it was just a gore movie. But that's what hindsight and researching films like this does to you. Like, filmmakers were clever back then. They had to be clever, especially Lewis, because he was doing something no one else was fucking doing. The Wizard of Gore, and then he does this, and then Blood Feast. All these films were very, very clever, despite the fact that they had a lot of gore in them.
Yeah, and we should probably mention the fact that, and again, this again just leads me to realize that Herschel Gordon Lewis wasn't trying to throw a hand grenade into the public discourse. He could have, though. He could very easily have. You know what he would have done? Here's how he could have done it. Make one of those characters a black guy.
Yep.
Make one of the victims black. He never did, though. If he had done that, though, I wonder how different we would feel about this movie.
I think it'd be closer to what Romero did with Night of the Living Dead, when he made the main character a black guy, and he gets killed by the mob at the end by an accident. I guarantee people would have a different reaction to this movie had it been that way. But simply having just a black cat with the noose, I think, does it enough.
Yeah, it does, because it makes you think that. Because the noose is so synonymous with lynching, and especially the first murder in this movie kind of almost feels like a lynch, because it's the first person who dies in this. Because there's four people, and then there's two. Well, there's really three couples in this movie. The third one isn't really a couple till the end of the movie. But the three couples, the first ones that get killed are basically swingers.
Yeah,
they're the bad people basically, by 60s standards, They're hardly Ozzie and Harriet, but they're the first ones to die, and but the wife of the guy, whose name I can't remember, she dies first, and the way she is killed, unlike all the others, it's not part of the barbecue we got going on, or the barrel roll, or the Mount Crash, or the horse race. It's not a ritual. It's just four guys in a room. Hey, take her to the doctor. I'm a doctor, because one of the guys took her off into the woods to make out with her and presumably do other things to her. And he ends up cutting her thumb off. And he's like, "Oh, that looks serious. Let's take you to the doctor." But and then the doctor proceeds to strap her down to a table, and a guy gets an axe and chops off her arm.
Yeah.
And you see the bloody stump, and they fondle around and play with the arm. And it almost feels like a gang rape. It almost feels like a lynching, in the sense that it's just a very intimate kind of group of people getting together to destroy this life. And all the other ones are the gamification of violence. Lynching was many things, but it was not a game. People treated it very seriously, from what I understand. It should be noted before we move on, I think, that even though Black Americans were lynched more than any other group, we tend to forget that one of the biggest lynching episodes that happened in Louisiana in 18, I want to say 40? no, 18, no, 18, in the 1880s, uh, was actually perpetrated on Sicilian Americans like myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because the chief of police had been murdered in New Orleans, and they thought that those dirty Sicilian mafia guys had done it. So the people basically formed a lynch mob and stormed the jail after the 11 guys who were brought to trial all got acquitted, and they took out those 11 Sicilian men and killed them all. And I didn't know this until after this, but apparently, uh, President, whoever was president at the time, his name escapes me. He's one of the guys nobody remembers. That president actually instituted Columbus Day the year after that to commemorate that tragedy. So even before anything, Columbus Day was never just about Christopher freaking Columbus. Columbus Day was to commemorate Italian Americans, and I wish more people knew that. So anyway,
Yeah.
moving on. But yeah, like we said, like John F. Kennedy was killed the year before this. Vietnam was going to start, and all this stuff, but like we said though, the tone. I think this movie's tone is what makes it so absorbing because it's so lighthearted,
Mhm.
but also so disturbing.
It is, but it's not is it's not serious. And
No, it's
everything
not.
else, when everything is happening in the world at large during this time period, the one thing that we did in the 60s, or what people did, was escape from that world. So you had a lot of the kids go to drive-ins, and you had these war
Mm,
films. And this became part of the culture of that time. Um, I think Lewis did a great job with kind of playing with the fact that it was an extremely gory film and making it fun and engaging and entertaining, because it could have been a really serious film, and we wouldn't remember it. We definitely would not remember it. It would not. I doubt that if it had been a completely serious film, it would be fondly remembered at all. I think the
yeah.
way in which he approached this film and his other films are the reason why we remember who he was. Not just because he
Mm,
just did gore. If he does just gore, he'd be thrown in there with a lot of the other Italian giallo films that would show up in the
mm,
70s that no one remembers because they all were the same. He created
yeah.
that was not like everything else. There's a reason why people remember Dario Argento from the 70s and his gore films. Is because he did it in a different way than everyone
Mm,
else. I think
yeah.
Gordon Lewis did the exact same thing. He
Yeah.
was first. He did it better than a lot of other people, and he actually had a story that was mostly entertaining.
Mm,
Gore can go either way, to be honest with you. It can be entertaining or it can be extremely gut munching, like you would say in the Saw movie. This is not a Saw movie.
no, no, because it's the first, one of the first of its kind. Like Lewis didn't really push boundaries that we would accept today as disgusting. I mean, we'll talk more about what the state of gore is now and what that all means, but we have to look at this movie in the context of starting all of that. But it causes me to, because well, I forgot. It does make me think about my first blush with Horatio Gordon Lewis, because usually on the show we do talk about what our origin story is with this movie. And I kind of forgot to mention, maybe we can talk about it a little bit. Like the first inkling I ever had that Herschel Gordon Lewis or his movies even existed, um, for you, it was that documentary. For me, it was the movie Juno. Because in Juno, Juno gets taken to Jason Bateman's house, and when she's still pregnant, and Jason Bateman's like, "Oh yeah, you got to see this movie. It's the Wizard of Gore," and she's like, "Wizard of Gore? This looks stupid." It is, but anyway, but he's like, "Oh no, man, this is like buckets of Caro syrup in it. You got to see this." And he puts it on, and in a PG-13 movie, we see someone, get their intestines kind of out with what I think is a buzzsaw. I'm not sure. You can't really see it very well. It's grainy. It's on VHS. And then the camera pans back to her. And she's like, "This is better than Suspiria," which no, it's not. But okay. But once that was planted in my head, I was like, "Oh, okay. This is a thing that exists." Years later, I think I saw Wizard of Gore on Netflix, and I tried to watch Wizard of Gore. I got to past like the first murder. Um, uh, I think this not I think it was a woman that gets sawed in half. Um, but like the moment that because in that movie basically it's a hypnotist who makes it seem like he disembowels people on stage, but when he snaps his fingers, it looks like they are fully restored. But this first woman who apparently is still hypnotized walks into a restaurant and then just drops dead with her intestines spilling out of her body. But she just happens to drop dead on a perfectly placed plastic tarp in the middle of a restaurant. So I was like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, no, I'm out. like if you're gonna be that cheap, I'm sorry, I'm done. So that's as far as I got to in Wizard of Gore. Um, so later on, I guess I got gradually exposed a little bit to the significance of Herschel Gordon Lewis's work through, I guess, through my relationships with the filmmakers in Florida, where I was from. In St. Petersburg, Tampa, we had this thing called the Florida Film Society, and that's where I met the guy I interviewed, Joel Wynkoop, who is probably one of he's a pioneer in his own right, in that he's one of the first shot-on-video cult icons. That whole shot-on-video horror and science fiction cult movement that started in the mid 80s and kind of flourished through the mid 90s.
Yeah.
He was there doing that, and he was there making his own movies and self-distributing the tapes to all these video stores up and down the area and selling them to us. So he's got so many great stories that hopefully you will check out when you listen to that interview. So that's how I started figuring out that he had other movies. And so, of course, through IMDb, I looked them up, looked up Blood Feast, and like, that doesn't look interesting. But because of the Confederate element to this, and I thought, and a lot of people said, oh, this is his best movie. I thought, there's probably something more to this. Boy, was I right. Because like we could literally spend a half an hour on this just talking about every shot in that title sequence because it goes hard. I was not expecting it to go as hard as it did. In fact, like after that, I was thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? I'm not sure I'm going to make this movie. I'm not sure I'm going to make it through. But the humor and the I guess the morbid curiosity, for lack of a better word, of this movie made me keep watching. Also, I would feel like a total coward and hypocrite if I didn't finish watching it. But I did.
It's not that bad of a movie. It's one of those movies that is it's seriously dated.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But when I watched it originally, I watched it with a bunch of Lewis films. I ended up for the fuck of it, buying a bunch of them. I got a lot of them on, I think it was Arrow Video. They had a ton of them on Arrow Video, and of course now if you're a fan of Herschel Gordon Lewis, they got the huge box set, which I also picked up. Because there were a lot of movies I just couldn't find, and that box set had a lot of the harder to find ones. And the thing is that they're all very similar in the way that they were made, because they were all made in such a small amount of time.
Oh yeah.
And so Lewis had hit like that span of like 10 years of making a lot of movies and doing all these different types of things, and then, like you said, he kind of disappeared for a long time before he came back and started getting back in there and doing more films, which I think is probably because of modern day audiences or cult audiences actually rediscovering his work. And I'm sure the 2001 Maniacs remake and the Wizard of Gore remake, both films of which I really enjoy.
And I'm sure being referenced and name dropped in Juno probably got more people to check out his movies too.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what happens with a lot of these people. When they come out, he was a flash in the night. He did some gore movies in the 60s and 70s, then was heavily forgotten until he was rediscovered again. Hence why we're doing a 60th anniversary show on him. So
of 2000 Maniacs. So, like, another thing I want to we haven't really talked very much about the plot of this movie. We're saying it's not that bad, and you're right, it's not. I have seen, growing up amongst Florida filmmakers, God bless them all, but man, I have seen worse movies than this. I would say I mean, granted, folks, if you haven't seen this out there, if you have like a massive aversion to really bad acting, but I mean, if you're a horror fan and you have that, what's wrong with you? But then you might not want to see this one, because the performances in this movie are not great. But I will say pretty much all the townsfolk are all great. I mean, they're all pretty much one-dimensional characters, but they do them so well. Especially the mayor. Actually, that actor, I can't remember his name. His real name's like Jeffrey Adams or something, but he goes by a name like Taucus.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He became like the Herschel's go-to Southern actor. Like he used him in like every movie after that. Like, whenever you have like somebody from the South or some crazy redneck or some like sleazy pimp or something, he would use that guy.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, can't remember his name. Sometimes my notes fail me because we go around and around, and anyway, you can look him up on IMDb. He's great in this. Like I said, massive Sid Haig vibes, and he's pretty much like the ringleader of this massacre. It's him and the doctor and those two idiots who aren't really idiots, but they kind of are. And the big handsome one who cuts off the lady's thumb. Harper, I believe is his name. And then that stupid little kid, that Dennis the Menace from hell, who kills the cat, who ends up being thankfully stupid. Because if he wasn't stupid, we would have no survivors. Because that's another thing that surprised me about this movie, to jump ahead a little bit. I was surprised. I was fully expecting nobody to survive this movie.
Oh, really?
I was fully expecting them to all die. Because that's what I'm accustomed to. Because all the rip-offs of the exploitation stuff that followed in its wake, the wake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and others like that, almost nobody survives. Or it seems like they survive, because like at the end, because like we said, there's 6 victims, and they had 5 events. One of them's killed privately because they wanted to cut her to pieces for the barbecue, and and they said, like, I hope I won't be late for the barbecue, and they hang up, and she's like, yeah, she won't be late for the barbecue, because if she don't show up, there ain't gonna be no barbecue. And later on, you see her arm rotating on the barbecue spit, and the other people think, what's that? What's that meat on the spit? He's like, oh, that's just, something. The gaslighting in this movie is ridiculous, but it's like a master class in like what it's like to be a victim of that kind of society. But yeah, so I do think it's hilarious in a darkly humorous way that while her arm is roasting on the barbecue spit, the song they're playing has lyrics like "Hold you round in my arms" or something like that. It makes reference. Yeah, it's almost as funny as at the end of the Coen Brothers' True Grit, playing "Leaning on the Everlasting Arm" after that poor Haley Steinfeld loses her arm at the end of that movie. Spoilers for that. Spoilers for that movie too.
I had forgotten about that. Actually, it's been a while since I've seen that movie.
Yeah, the mayor says the roasting of the meat is symbolic. Although what's funny is you find out just when the characters kind of do, and by the characters I mean the 2 people who aren't really couples but become a couple. There's a lady named Deborah, I think, and the other guy who is Tom White, who should be the smartest man in the movie. He is not. He is supposedly a teacher, but he was a hitchhiker. He hitchhiked to get on this lady's car, and he's probably the only good hitchhiker in the history of horror movies.
That's a good point to make.
Anyway, so he's like, I'm going down to a teaching convention down in Atlanta. I can't stick around for 2 days because the Centennial is supposed to be a 2-day event. And throughout the 2 days, they separate the couples, by saying, "You gotta come see this. You gotta come see that. I'll take you for a tour of the town." And that's how they get them into these death traps, basically, that all the other townspeople surround and watch and cheer as they are, killed. The second one after the barbecue is the horse race, where a guy with the swinger husband literally gets drawn and quartered by 4 different horses, and you do not see his limbs detach. You do see them drag.
Yep.
But that particular murder is interesting because it is the only time in this movie where the townspeople don't seem so jolly about what they've done. It's like something about the weight of what they've done seems to hit them. And then something strange, something almost kind of Nuremberg-y, something like Nazi Germany-ish happens, I think, when the people start to kind of wonder, are we doing the right thing? And then, of course, the one guy's like, "You can't back out now. You know what happens if you back out. Come on, let's have some music." And then and then the songs come back, the banjo plays, and they're back on it.
Well, you mentioned something intriguing about the whole movie is there's the songs. There are all types of songs that play throughout the whole movie. And whenever they do, it almost feels as though you're supposed to be having a jovial time.
Yes.
These people kill these Northerners. It's so odd-putting, but it's oddly entertaining.
Yeah, it's entertaining to you, the viewer, but it also, in a weird way, kind of implicates you as the audience, because like you come to realize, especially after that scene, that the music is almost kind of like it's almost like it's there. The noise is there to drown out your conscience. It's like it's there to drown out the inner voice that says, "Stop this, stop this." And if all of those people in the town were in fact normal mortal humans, that scene would be particularly interesting. But they are not, which made me wonder, how does this really work? Like, what would they do to them if they backed out? What would happen? Because they're dead and they're ghosts. What would they do? Just like push them out of the town, and then what happens? They go to hell or something? It's never really explained. I mean, there is some explanation stuff that happens at the end of the movie after the 2 survivors try to get the sheriff and try to find the town. And just before they fade away, they say things that kind of explain sort of kind of how it works. And one of the idiots, whose name I can't remember, does suggest that if they don't get back to sleep, they won't come back to the town ever. So basically, I guess like if they leave the town after the centennial is over, they can't ever come back, and they just disappear forever, I guess.
Yep.
So I guess maybe that's what they were threatening them with in that scene, but it's not very clear. So
it's not very clear, but I don't think it plays that much in the overall scheme of the movie, anyways.
Well, I do think that Lewis did that for A, because he wanted to parody Brigadoon. That's what happens in Brigadoon. B, I think he wanted to have that in the third act as kind of a gotcha.
I can see that.
A twist, but I think unintentionally, and I wasn't going to get to this till later, but I might as well bring this up now. Unintentionally, I think by making them ghosts, I think Lewis is making a comment on one of the oldest and most sinister organizations in the South, the Ku Klux Klan. Because some of y'all out there don't know the reason why the KKK wear sheets and why they wear hoods. It is because when the Ku Klux Klan got started during Civil War Reconstruction era, their conceit was that they were dressing up as the ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers, getting their revenge. And what do we have in this movie? The ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers and townspeople getting their revenge. And what revenge are they getting? Well, they do, at that barbecue I mentioned, the 2 smart people in this movie, quote unquote smart. I always say quote unquote smart because after we discuss this, I'm going to tell you how dumb they really are. But anyway, they they come out of the barbecue and they notice something strange. Here, look at this. So Tom White, the teacher, says, well, he finds this plaque, this very kind of modern looking stone placard, which those of us who live in Georgia see these everywhere because when you live in the state of Georgia, after a while you come to realize you are living in a giant state that's one big cemetery. And everywhere you'll see a plaque that says, so and so, this battle was fought here. This army came through this area that had a church in 1864 and all that. Tons of plaques like that in Georgia. And they come across this plaque that says, on this day, 1865, the town of Pleasant Valley was massacred by, quote, renegade Union soldiers who killed and mutilated them. So I guess the roasting meat is symbolic of how these Union soldiers mutilated these people, and that's how they died. And since there are ghosts of children there, I guess they killed everybody.
Which is very disturbing when you think about it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they're getting revenge for. But I didn't realize until you pointed it out, that their failure to kill them all is so indicative of the failure of the Old South to win the war. I thought that's brilliant, Kevin. I never even thought about that.
Well, I didn't think until I watched it the second time. I was like, I wasn't that it just didn't dawn on me until I was watching it the second time for this conversation. I was like, and that's because I'm in a different mindset when I watched it this time than I was when I first saw it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a little bit of history time, folks. Stuff like that did happen. The Union was not some saintly organization during the Civil War. They did commit atrocities against the Southern people, the most famous of which, of course, is Sherman's March to the Sea, in which General Sherman literally just pretty much killed everybody in every town, military or civilian, on his way, and he basically marched it all the way to the Atlantic. I think he went all the way down to Florida. I can't remember where his March to the Sea ended, but he sure cut a swath through Georgia, that's for sure. But yeah, the metaphor of the ghosts of the Old South coming back is, I think, unintentionally on Lewis's part, a chilling metaphor for the South rising again in modern times in the guise of the toxic conservative politics that plague us today. And that's why I think this movie is important.
When you say that, it also it means to me that someone could try and redo this now with a different type of mentality to play in with modern day politics, and that might be interesting.
Oh yeah, but surely it would start a powder keg of controversy. I can tell that there is actually an article that I read. It was a review. I don't know if it's this one. I've got two of them pulled up here, but there was one review of this movie I read online that basically takes this movie to task for creating the harmful Southern stereotypes that would plague the genre for the rest of the century. That basically this movie is but that basically this movie is like one big long anti-Southern scree. Which I disagree, because there's at least one good Southern character in this movie, the sheriff. Yeah, he has a small part, but he's there. He doesn't kill anybody in this movie. He's not a bad guy.
Oh my God.
But Lewis did use real Southerners to portray all these townspeople. Basically, all those extras you see, they're not extras. They're just people who lived in St. Cloud, Florida. And he said, and he said that on the commentary track to this movie, he said that he wanted to find people who, quote, genuinely had the right balance of sweetness and evil. That's what he said. He wanted some sweetness and evil in their expressions.
Sweetness and evil. That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. And that combination just makes it all the more disturbing.
Well, no matter how you put it, if someone just cursorily sits down and watches this film, it's going to be disturbing. But if you take the chance to understand the context under which the film was originally made, and the type of filmmaker Herschel Gordon Lewis is or was with the other films that he did, then you understand exactly what he was trying to go for in a landscape where people were trying to do something new. We had the JFK assassination, and of course the Vietnam War. You know, it's hard to go back to that mindset of what was going on with people back then and filmmakers who are trying to find a niche or find a way to engage with the audiences when they were being inundated with violence all the time on the news, especially.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny too is this movie came out, well, Bonnie and Clyde by Warren Beatty was considered like the groundbreaking violent movie. It was like the first R-rated movie basically because it had showed the blood and the especially in the big shootout scene that kills them in the end. Like Warren Beatty specifically wanted to emulate the JFK assassination. There's a Bruder film footage, so he had his scalp rigged to pop up a little bit when he gets shot. So everyone thinks, oh, that was such a groundbreaking film for the way it portrayed violence. I looked it up. That movie came out in 1967. Herschel Gordon Lewis was doing much more than that in 1964. We should probably also let people know who haven't seen this movie, please don't go in expecting to see Terrifier 2 when you watch this, because and we'll talk more about what that movie means for the gore debate in a bit, because I do want to touch on that and the state of things now, because like the gore effects in this movie, I mean, I wouldn't even compare them to Tom Savini's work later in Dawn of the Dead. They are, but they're not ridiculously fake. I think they're just real enough, and I think that the townspeople sell the effects enough. And also, like, he doesn't go super overboard with them either. Like, he kind of sort of does in Wizard of Gore. Wizard of Gore is the one where he really tried to push the envelope in 1970, with the intestines and the viscera and everything just coming out of it. He really did. But for this one, the gore effects in this are really just kind of one step removed from, I would say, I guess, what's called the Grand Guignol Theater in the 1800s. Where you're using like red paint, basically.
Exactly what I get from this. It does look like red paint. It kind of takes you away from the fact that you're not watching real violence because it's so red.
It's so bright red. It's so, although it kind of fits in with the color scheme of the movie too. Like I kind of love old color movies, especially Technicolor and things like that. I will say, like, real quick, like, watching this, the version I watched on Tubi, which, by the way, is getting into some controversy now because apparently Tubi is starting to censor some of their movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know if they did it to this movie, but Tubi is starting to, I don't remember which ones particularly, but there are some where they're starting to put, like, digital noise over certain violent movies. Some sexual and nudity things are starting to get censored. Not all of them, but I've heard that the category 70s movies has particularly been affected by some of their decisions to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is a free service, so they do have advertisers that they're beholden to. So, but it's sad because this is usually where we go to find stuff like this. So yeah, like I said, don't go to this thinking this is going to be like Terrifier 2. Don't go into this thinking that it's, Peter Jackson's dead alive. It's not spurting blood everywhere, although there is a little bit of that when the thumb gets cut off. But, again, for its time, I think it still works, but also because of all the implications and all the symbolism and all the time and place horror from real life that this movie intentionally or unintentionally brings about. I think that's what causes it to still work even today.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if y'all, although if you're still listening to us at this point, you're not going in cold. But if somehow you stumbled across this movie with knowing nothing about it, I think after those first 4 minutes, you'd be like, "What the am I watching?" Oh man.
I will agree with you. There will be some people who will put this movie in and will do exactly that, especially while they're watching the opening sequence and the musical number and all that. Um, like I said, you have to go in knowing that you're not watching a Hollywood movie. It is a lower budget, independent produced film by someone who eventually became known as the Godfather of Gore, and this was one of his earlier films. So it's um not as refined as maybe some of
Mhm.
his later films.
Oh yeah. Oh, another thing I wanted to talk about here before we get further into it. I don't know why, but for some reason, when we get to the barrel roll scene, um, with the dark-haired guy, this is the first kind of true innocence that they kill because the two Springer people, we get to know them a little bit, but they're kind of a-holes. We're not too sad about them dying by getting disemboweled and drawn and quartered. But the other guy, they seem to be kind of representing the Ward and June Cleaver kind of couple because the only other couple is these two people who just met, hitchhiker and driver. But these two people I kind of felt a little sorry for, especially the dark-haired guy, who I looked at him and I think, wow, that guy could pass for Italian or Jewish
Hmm.
because he did not seem like our hero Tom White, who is very kind of very he's very white, very 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 white, very Anglo, very white. And so is the girl. But this guy and his wife, they're both dark haired, and they're the closest thing I think we have to people of color in this movie. But for whatever reason, like when he's getting carted away to get killed by getting stuck in a barrel that has nails driven through it, for some reason, my popped into my head. I was like, wait a minute, isn't this just kind of the redneck version of Wicker Man?
Yeah.
Or since this came out first, isn't Wicker Man just the Irish version of this movie?
You know what? I can see there being an argument for that. Wicker Man has a police officer who ventures into an entire island, a world where he doesn't fit, and he doesn't know what's going on. And that's essentially what these six people are doing. They ventured into a world or been manipulated, as the character in Wicker Man was also manipulated into going into this world that he's not really familiar with, and all hell breaks loose due to a ritualistic um, mentality of an entire town. I can see your parallels between the two films.
And also, it's the entire town is the monster.
Uh huh.
The same thing in Wicker Man. Everybody's in on it, even though at one point you think there is the child that the guy's going to rescue in that movie. Spoilers again for a 70-year-old movie. Oh no, sorry, 50-year-old movie. No, she's in on it too. It was all a trap in the very beginning. So yeah, it's the same kind of thing where an outsider is lured in to take part in a ritual murder. Like that's kind of what these murders are.
Yeah.
They are ritual murders disguised as cornhole and games, basically the gamification of death that started in ancient Rome.
And and to throw it off, both of them have to happen. One has to, in Wicker Man, it has to happen every season to have a successful crop, and then in Pleasant Valley, it happens every 100 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which also kind of makes me so I don't know why it came to me when this happens, which is also just the second most disturbing death I think in the movie because they're pulling this guy by his legs to hold him in there, and I'm sorry, it happens fairly quickly, but you cannot tell me that they put those nails in that quickly. That's just the power of editing. It takes a long time to hammer nails into a barrel. So that means that this poor dark-haired guy got to know what was happening to him. The poor drawn and quartered guy was drunk. He's barely conscious. Um, this guy got to know what was happening to him, and
Yeah.
he got to see the nails go in the barrel very slowly, and they just roll him down the hill and see his blood cover all over him. So yeah, that's pretty terrible. Almost, and probably even worse is of course his wife, who gets gaslit into willingly strapping herself to a table that has a giant boulder which basically operates kind of like one of those carnival games where you have a guy sitting on a platform underneath a thing of water, and everybody tries to throw a ball on this lever that's supposed to send him into the water. Well, except in this case, it's a boulder, and it's supposed to send it on top of her body. Mm-hmm. And so one of our stupids, I can't remember his name, actually gets to throw the baseball. He's like, "Man, I should be in the major leagues."
I know.
Squish.
Yep. Well, and you know what? You're right in that. It just dawned on me as we've been talking that a lot of the gore, the actual act of the gore, is actually off screen, and we see what happens after that. It's not like a torture porn film that's made, 10 years ago when that was really popular, where you were actually shown every bit of everything that happened to these people who are being tortured. This one, you were seeing more of the aftermath, and then there's just a lot of gore to it.
Yeah. Also, I just realized something on my notes here. I'm going to ask you, I don't know if you noticed this too, or maybe it's just on my version of that I saw on Tubi, which definitely fits the Grindhouse. Visually, it fits the Grindhouse aesthetic, because I don't know what's wrong with the print for this movie, but every now and then it will go from 35 millimeter film to it looks like video, and then back to 35. And then like the aspect ratio changes a little bit from like this to this to this. And there's scratches in the film. There's long green lines going through at one point. But there's a sound issue that happens at one point that I think accidentally makes the barrel roll scene even more disturbing. I don't know if you noticed this, but like, is it me, or does it seem like the audio in the barrel roll scene made their voices sound a little slow and growly and more like grisly?
Well, unfortunately I watched it from my Herschel Gordon Lewis box set, so I have a cleaned up version of everything. So I did not see.
Oh, so you didn't see? There was no scratches or things on yours.
No, not scratches. It still looks like an older movie, but there's none of those scratches or anything like that.
I kind of like to see a restored version of this then, to see if any of that is cleaned up, because I mean, for my money, because I noticed it, I was like, "Ooh, this is weird. I wonder if he meant to do that," because it makes their voices sound a lot creepier. Like it's hard for me. I can't really duplicate it, but just like you watch it again, and I was like, "Ooh, it makes it almost more dreamlike in a weird way." I mean, the film wasn't slowing down. This was an audio thing, but the voices weren't totally out of sync, so it's almost like the pitch was off, but it made everything just slightly off.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't. So I wondered if anybody else. So hey, people out there, if you noticed that too when you were watching this movie on Tubi, chime in on our Patreon page. Send us a message. I'd like to know. Oh, so I forgot to mention how stupid Miss Adams and Mr. White actually are. Like the moment they find out about the history of the town, they don't escape. They stay there. And they try to escape in broad daylight.
Yep.
Which they do. It's a fun sequence because they have to literally bonk somebody on the head to get out. They are chased through a swamp. One of them falls through quicksand.
That doesn't look like quicksand
at all. But and then my favorite funny part of this is like they get his car back, which honestly, if this were any other movie, this car would be on cinder blocks and the engine would be completely removed. The people of Pleasant Valley would have freaking made it impossible for them to use their motor car.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, there it is in one piece. And they literally trick Demon Dennis the Menace, Billy, into getting him to get them the keys so that they can do the car, because they lure him with the promise of ice cream. I'm like, we'll get you ice cream.
Ice cream and candy, whatever's
it. Candy. Yeah. Which they give him neither. They just throw him out of the car, basically.
Yeah, and he comments that he doesn't get any of that candy. I was like, dude. He cares more about that than having let go of the people he was supposed to help kill. Which
exactly.
I would love to see where that actor is now, just to get his ideals on how he made the movie, how he felt making this movie.
Yeah, I think he does conventions now. Like I read on IMDb somewhere that he had done other movies since then. So like he was a child actor who did other stuff. So I'm sure that he does the circuit every now and then. He's got to show up somewhere because he's not that old.
No, he's not.
But like, I love how this movie basically ends in a car chase,
Hmm.
and and they try to chase them out. But up until that point, like I said, I was dead certain that there was only going to be one survivor or no survivors, because they had okay, we've had the first murder that was off screen, we had the barrel, we had the drawing, the barbecue, the drawing and quartering, the barrel roll, and then they're sitting around talking about, all right, we gotta get her ready, get the chick ready for the gauntlet. And they do not describe what the gauntlet is, but the fact that they use the word gauntlet, I have to say, I'm sorry to say this, but I feel almost cheated out of that.
Oh my God.
Like, I kind of wanted to see at least what the gauntlet was and what they were going to do, but we never see it because they escape.
I never thought about that till now.
Like, we never see it. They don't kill 6 people. They only kill 4. And yeah, they get out. Oh man. So yeah, but I can tell you, if this movie were made today, that their escape plan would not have succeeded, because nowadays I think we're more accustomed to having there be more reversals in our third acts with our movies, especially with our horror movies.
Yeah.
We are more accustomed to, oh, they're gonna get out. No, they're not. Oh, they can get out. No, they're not. Oh, all hope is lost. Yes, it is. That sort of thing. I feel like at least a modern remake would probably have had Deborah or Miss Adams, whatever her name is. I'm sure Mr. White would have been killed probably in the gauntlet, but she would have gone through some kind of torture. She would have gotten, she would have probably survived, but minus a limb. I think she would have gotten out of there with some kind of scars, but survived the stronger for it. Should have gone through some kind of character arc. You
Yeah,
know?
there most certainly would be. And you probably only have the one woman surviving, and she would have gone through some. She would have probably gone through the gauntlet. And that's the thing is, we at this time when this movie was released and made, we didn't have those tropes on what a slasher movie was or what any of this stuff was. Lewis was breaking new ground. He was producing stuff no one had ever heard of. There was no template for him. He was creating doing these films. And that's why I think some of the audiences nowadays, when they watch it, it's not as predictable as they think it might be, because it didn't follow any of those. It was before all those tropes and those cliches became cliches.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I remember. Oh, I just found it. The scathing review of this movie comes from some reviewer named Stephen Gillespie. So his main problem with this, he says, in the end, since they are ghosts getting revenge for something the Union forces did, his criticism of the movie is like, annoyingly, then the sin that is being punished is not the sin of the Confederacy; it is the sin of the Union forces.
Okay.
I think he kind of missed the point of the movie. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Wow. Okay. Well, are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience about 2000 Maniacs and the 60th anniversary of this film?
Well, I do think that we should end our discussion by talking about, okay, we've talked about how this movie started the whole trope of gore in movies, and changed movies in general, but specifically horror movies, and changed the landscape forever. Well, maybe not this movie, but definitely this movie and Blood Feast. But I think we should probably also bring it to the modern day and think about what's the state of the Union, as it were, the state of gore today. Because I'm beginning to think that, now granted, I haven't seen Terrifier 2 yet. Have you?
Oh yeah, I've seen Terrifier.
Okay, so you've seen it too, and you saw you've seen the Serbian film, right? The uncut version of that. Okay. So I will put forth to you the question. I wonder, since Terrifier 2 and now Terrifier 3 is going to be coming out soon, has gore gone so far that really we can't go any further? I mean, really, have we gone so extreme now that we can only go back at this point?
So for me, I don't think any of these are nearly anywhere near as effective as some of the Japanese films of the 70s and 80s.
Oh,
I was actually thinking about that as I was having a discussion about the movie Evil Dead Trap, which is a
oh,
disturbing fucking movie. And that movie is an older movie. I just think American audiences had just general American audiences had not seen this type of gore on screen that hit it mainstream until Terrifier 2. There's a reason why so many people didn't see the first Terrifier. The second Terrifier is an extremely gory film.
and
Now,
not just extremely gory. I hear it's extremely sadistically gory.
it is, and it lacks. And I know there's some people who've never watched all the Saw movies out there, and they haven't bothered to pay attention to the actual stories behind the Saw films. And so they just think that these are torture porn flicks. When point of fact is, and I will always defend the Saw movies, they are not just torture films. If you want to watch a torture film, you watch the movie Captive. That has no fucking point, and that's a torture porn movie. Saw movies always had a point to the story and what they were, what the lesson that Jigsaw was instilling upon his victims. Terrifier 2 is a pretty just gory movie. It's entertainingly gory. Like Art the Clown is entertaining as fuck. That's what makes that movie so powerful. Is Art the Clown. Without Art the Clown, it would be a general gore film, and no one would have paid any attention to this low budget horror movie. Nobody would have paid any attention. But our fear of clowns, the part 1 and part 2 had just killer clowns is in everyone's brain pan right now. We have all these movies, Halloween movies, especially that have to do with haunted houses. Clowns are everywhere. Art the Clown Terrifier 2 isn't a movie that just came out. Art the Clown has been around for a little bit. He was in several short anthology films before he made it to the big times. But like Lewis, the filmmaker, and I can't remember his name to save my life right now, but the filmmaker behind Terrifier, it did something very similar.
Yeah, Damien Leone.
Thank you. The very extremely gory first film. People didn't take notice of it. Some of us did. I didn't see Terrifier. I saw All Hallows Eve with Art the Clown and the short. I didn't give Terrifier the time of day until I saw how effective the second one was. And then I saw them both at the exact same time. I saw 1 and 2 like within a day of each other. And I found the second one, which has a much better story, much more effective with the way they approach gore. Now, it is extreme. It took Evil Dead Trap and made it a little bit more extreme, but Evil Dead Trap is, 20, 30 years old? If you watch Japanese films from that time period, they were extremely gory. Meatball Machine, Machine Girl, you have all these, what's it?
Tokyo Gore Police?
Tetsuo the Iron Man. These were all early films, Japanese films that already was doing gory shit. It just didn't make the mainstream here like Terrifier did because it wasn't a clown. I don't think Japanese people may not know what the fuck a clown is. I mean, when you watch a Japanese horror film, you don't see many clowns in their movies.
Yeah.
Clowns may be something indicative of American audiences. American audiences are terrified from fucking clowns.
I think that's what I was trying to get at too, is that you mentioned like what makes Terrifier 2 significant in the larger cultural thing is the fact that it's almost like the mainstreaming of extreme gore, because this movie was released unrated and yet it played in multiplexes everywhere, and it made a crap ton of money. So that's why I'm wondering. That's why the open question is put out there by me, and I think by the legacy of 2000 Maniacs is: have we gone so far now that even extreme gore like what's in Terrifier 2, can that possibly be topped? What is transgressive anymore? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. To be honest with you, I would have never thought a film like Terrifier 2 would have ever hit the mainstream. That it's a fucking fluke, but it will only be considered a fluke if Terrifier
Mm.
3 does not do well.
Ah, yes.
Does extremely well, it will be ushering in something like Saw did.
Mm.
Saw ushered in the so-called torture porn, but
Yeah,
Terrifier movies aren't torture porn.
right.
So it would be starting a new trend. It might be a dangerous trend
Mm.
of films that emulate that same concept. I don't
And
think
maybe,
complicated.
yeah.
Art, Art the Clown doesn't say a fucking word throughout the whole movie.
Mm.
And they gave him a so-called love interest in the second movie, which is why the second movie I think is a much more powerful film. But
Hmm.
there's just as many people getting dismembered, killed, and cut up in that movie as in the first one. But I think I think you're right. I think audiences have different tastes. They come and they go. I mean, we'll see if Saul, what are they on, number 11 or 12?
Ele- 11. Yeah.
When that one comes out this year versus Terrifier 3, it's going to be interesting to see which one audiences prefer, because
Yeah.
they're not the same type of movie at all.
No, no. One will have a much bigger budget and a wider appeal, and will be the 11th movie in a series, whereas Terrifier 3 will be the third, and for some people, the second, because let's face it, like you said, most people haven't seen the first one. And it's going to be a Christmas movie, too. So
Yeah,
it's got that going for it.
I think Saw would have a better chance of standing out now if it had been like a holiday movie.
I know, right?
I think
Although they probably should make a holiday Saw, now that I think about it.
they should have did Christmas one. When Terrifier 3 came out and said they was doing the Christmas one, I was like, that's fucking brilliant. I wish Saw had done that.
Speaking of which, I think, I mean, like you said, you mentioned before, 2000 Maniacs it's never really been remade. It's been rebooted twice. And part of that has to do with the fact that, I mean, you got 2001 Maniacs and 2001 Maniacs Field of Screams.
That's right. With Brian, Bill Moseley. I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm, that's right. So we should be coming. And they mentioned this kind of at the end of this movie. They're like, hey, I guess for our next centennial, we're going to have rocket ships to chase them Yankees with. That seems to me like Herschel Gordon Lewis was leaving the door open for 3001 Maniacs in space.
Oh my God.
Somebody out there, please, you're listening to this podcast, you're a screenwriter, I don't know who you are, but if you have the power to do so, let's speak that movie into existence, because that could be really fun.
Oh my God. All right. So do you want to come up with your rating for the movie for this episode?
It was a hard one. I also tried to find like a Schwarzenegger alternator for this movie, and I couldn't find it. I could not find a single moment that was like Schwarzenegger worthy in this movie. I mean, the banging on the head part probably could have done it, but I was like, no, I can't. I can't cheapen this movie any further than it cheapens itself.
I know what I want to do for the rating though for this one. I really do.
Oh, you do? Well, what I want to do is I will say, I think the one thing that symbolizes this movie the most to me is that arm roasting on the barbecue spit.
Mm.
So I will rate this movie 3 out of 5 barbecue spit roasting arms.
Nice one. So for me, I really enjoyed the barrel rolling sequence because I was never expecting that damn sequence to be in this movie. And so I always have a little fun with that the 3 times I've seen the movie now. So for me, I'm going to rate this 3 barrel rolling sequences.
3 nail barrels.
Barrel rolling sequences, yes. The thing is this, I don't think this is, for me, this is not my favorite of his films, but it's one of his most entertaining. But I've seen more of his films than you have.
Obviously. Which one of his is your favorite? Maybe we can put it on the list.
I don't know yet, because I just got the box set and I want to see the rest of them.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe
and that's the thing is it's so hard to see some of his films, and then of course the box set only didn't do all of his movies. It did like a selection of his movies, and then I
Yeah,
went off and got a smaller box set with some of his nudie flicks, so I've seen some of those already.
yeah,
But I haven't seen all of his movies yet. uh
yeah,
I guess it was just hard to kind of collate everything that he did. uh
yeah. Some
and
of
I
them are just so hard to find. Like,
it,
I mean, I tried to find the Uh-Oh Show, Joel's movie that he did with them. Cannot find it. You can't even find it on YouTube. Nobody's uploaded a copy.
Nah, yeah, you'd have to rent it from Amazon. I was looking for it myself because I hadn't
Yeah,
seen it. It reminded me I hadn't seen that one, and I hadn't seen Blood Mania yet either. So I'm gonna have to get that one so I can see that because I haven't seen it either. I mean, they're just
yeah,
some of his films are just hard to see unless you're just gonna rent them from Amazon, which we all should do. But I'm a horror fan and I like to collect them. Like I said, I have his box set with all his movies, and then I have his new.
yeah.
So
I think I have yet. I'm so cheap, I guess, because of my upbringing that I have yet to, like, if I see that a movie is not available to stream and I haven't seen it yet, I'm not gonna buy it off Amazon for full price sight unseen. Like, I will buy a movie sight unseen from like the dollar store
yeah.
or like a thrift store. I do that all the time. Sometimes I'll even do that at Walmart. Sometimes I'll find something. Oh, I heard this was good. I can't see why I would hate this. Bought it for $7 or $8 at Walmart. I will do that, but I'm not gonna freaking put money in Jeff Bezos' money just in pocket just because I haven't seen all of Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies. That's just not something I feel fiscally responsible for. As a
Understandable. Uh,
Yeah, but I will say I think that before I forget,
oh yeah.
I think that we should end this discussion with a quote from Herschel himself that I think kind of sums up everything. Speaking about himself and his legacy, and it's in the DVD commentary for this movie. Lewis said this: "They couldn't tell what we were. We were outlaws in a sense, and yet we were making so much money out of these pictures. No one could understand it. With this picture, we legitimized the genre movies, and that may have been the reason that subsequent to 2000 Maniacs, the flood began." I'm sure he's speaking of the flood of blood.
Yeah, yeah. So, with that, I'd like to thank you, Thomas, for joining us for Conversations in Horror, and especially helping us to celebrate the 60th anniversary of 2000 Maniacs. I hope that when people listen to this, they will actually go out there and seek out some of Lewis's other films. They are, but when you do watch them, audience, please take them in consideration of when the movies were made and the cultural impact on the horror genre that they had, because they were creating a whole new genre within the horror genre. This was early 60s. He was doing stuff that no one else was doing, breaking new ground. And sometimes we forget about these independent filmmakers that do this. We don't want to forget these guys. These guys had a profound effect on the genre. And here at Conversation in Horror, we like to celebrate the achievements of independent filmmakers and the people that helped usher in where we are now. With that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us with Conversations in Horror. Go out there and enjoy 2000 Maniacs, the original by director Herschel Gordon Lewis. Everyone out there, please check us out on social media. Check out some of our previous episodes. And don't forget, support your horror films and support your horror filmmakers. Thank you and have a good day.
Oh, and don't forget to check out my extended interview with Joel Wynkoop, the star of many straight shot on video movies, but specifically Herschel Gordon Lewis's last movie, The Uh-Oh Show. It's almost an hour-long interview. He's got so many great stories and insights into Herschel Gordon Lewis himself, the man, and his process, and it's great. Please listen to that. It's cool.
Yes, please listen to that, because this is one of our special things that we're doing for everyone out there, where we get to have an interview between one of our special guests, Thomas, and of course someone who had a profound effect in the indie film industry. So check that out as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant day.
Bye.
Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.